It's a great question. I've been a believer in measuring Lp(a) for a long time, way before it was in vogue. I used to test it in patients that came in with premature MI. If I was on call, you know, 37-year-old comes in with an MI, not cocaine, not, excessive tobacco use, not familial hypercholesterolemia. Why did that happen? So, I've been checking in that circumstance, really going back a very, very long time, probably into the late 90s. But then in patients in whom those sort of really dramatic presentations weren't there, but just somebody coming in with athero, would I test LP Little? Well, I have been doing that routinely for a few years now, or several years now. The European Society of Cardiology guidelines had endorsed that approach of measure Lp(a) in everybody some years ago, and I've been doing it since that time. And the National Lipid Association here in the U.S. also had, and now the guidelines from the HA and the ACC have also taken on that position. So it matches what I've already been doing. So I guess I'd say I'm happy to see it in the guidelines. I think one can debate the exact level of evidence. I'm not, necessarily going to get into that part. I guess that's a matter of philosophy. That is, you think things should be class one if there isn't really, sort of randomized evidence to support it. So personally, I think in general, the answer to that should be no. But, Lp(a)'s value is as an independent risk marker. That doesn't mean that you should necessarily do things therapeutically because there's no randomized data yet. We're all eagerly awaiting, probably later this calendar year, the first of the randomized clinical trials looking at Lp(a) drugs that specifically lower Lp(a) targeting drugs. And that'll be really interesting if those trials are positive or have positive signals, and that validates the idea that specific therapeutics lowering Lp(a) are clinically useful. And if not, that means it's an independent risk marker, but maybe sort of like HDL, but we haven't been able to design therapeutics that specifically raise HDL that also lower cardiovascular risk. So it could be a complex story like that. So, the jury is still out. I think it's more likely than not Lp(a) lowering drugs will lower cardiovascular risk, but HDL does provide a cautionary tale with the HDL raising drugs not clearly reducing cardiovascular outcomes, unless they also lower LTL by a lot. So I think that the Lp(a) in the guidelines is a good thing. Right now, what I do with that information, as I said, I routinely measure it, and if it's elevated, I am even more aggressive about other cardiovascular risk factors. It's a risk amplifier. If the LDL is already elevated and now I find out the Lp(a) is elevated, I might be more inclined to start a PCSK9 inhibitor if the patient otherwise would meet the sort of eligibility criteria to be on a PCSK9 inhibitor. So there are some things that I think are actionable with the knowledge of having an Lp(a) that's elevated in a particular patient. But having said that, I do know there's a bit of controversy out there about the exact level of evidence, and I think in general, if things are going to be class one, there really should be randomized evidence to support not just measuring something, but then that it's actionable. Because otherwise, class one sort of indicates that you absolutely must do it, and if you don't do it, does that mean that's an omission of care? Is that something that'll be reflected in performance metrics? Does it raise other potential risks? So I do understand the controversy around it, but putting aside some of that controversy about the exact level of recommendation, conceptually, yeah, I think you should measure Lp(a) in patients. It's a great question. I'm a big believer in LDL lowering. I think, other than on some corners of the internet, most people would agree that LDL is on the causal pathway to atherosclerosis. Lower is better than higher if one can attain it safely without side effects. And greater duration of lowering is better than a shorter duration of lowering. Certainly that's true in high-risk patients, as cardiologists see. But even more broadly, I think in primary prevention, doesn't mean that there aren't some data gaps, but certainly the general concept of lower is better is certainly validated. And I do like the fact that targets are clearly back in the guidelines. That was a real backward step some years ago when the guidelines eliminated targets for LDL. It's sort of a good illustration of the fact that guidelines are just that. They're not always sacrosanct. If you look at different times and places, guidelines have made mistakes. So I do think calling them guidelines are correct. It doesn't replace good clinical judgment or individualized patient care. But putting aside philosophy, yeah, I think all those different medicines you mentioned that are evidence-based to lower LDL cholesterol are underutilized. Statins remain underutilized. High-dose statins remain underutilized. In part, that's because there's just a lot of bad stuff out there about them on the internet, and that seems to be growing, not decreasing. Lots of medical misinformation. Similarly, ezetimibe remains really underutilized, a real shame. I think it's an example of what happens when, there's great cardiovascular outcome trial data, but it comes sort of at the end of the so-called life cycle of a drug before it goes generic, and then there's nobody really out there advertising the generic drug to say, "Hey, look at this great cardiovascular outcome trial data." So it's incredibly underused. There was an analysis that Rahul Agrawal did some years ago, published in JAMA from the NHANES registry, looking at the use of ezetimibe, other things too, but including ezetimibe in adults with CAD in the US, still single digits. I mean, it's really, it's generic, it's safe, it's effective. Why wouldn't you use it? But, that's the situation there. The PCSK9 inhibitors and monoclonal antibodies, terrific drugs. But, when they were launched, the price was too high. It was higher than the value supported at that time. Since that time, there's more data that's come out, longer-term observational data, some longer-term data even from randomized clinical trials, though in a non-randomized phase, all supporting robust benefits from PCSK9 inhibition. But certainly at the time of launch, the price was not supported by the value. In fact, I led the pharmacoeconomic analysis for alirocumab, one of the monoclonal antibody PCSK9 inhibitors. And that analysis, which I did in conjunction with the physicians and scientists from the respective companies that made that drug, came out with the conclusion that the drug was priced too high at initial launch of the drug. So that really, did poison the well for a period of time. But hopefully physicians realize now that the pre-authorizations aren't quite as painful as they were initially. The prices have come down to a range where at least the pharmacoeconomic analyses do support value, and the data has become even more voluminous and more robust. So definitely the monoclonal antibodies with great outcome trial data, multiple trials, and some ongoing trials still vastly underutilized. Inclisiran has also come to a clinical use and is in the guidelines now. I think lots of great data in terms of safe, potent LDL lowering, and for patients in particular where twice-a-year injection, is going to optimize their adherence. It's a great option. Not every patient's going to want to take an injection every 2 to 4 weeks. And their outcome data are not yet available, but are in the works, so to speak, with 2 really well-designed secondary prevention trials. And I happen to chair the primary prevention trial, Victorian-1 Prevent. It's fully enrolled and in the follow-up phase. It'll still be a few years away before the results are there. But that'll give us more data specifically about inclisiran, and the primary prevention trial will be, the first dedicated primary prevention trial in the PCSK9 inhibitor space, the monoclonal antibodies. The most recent trial, the Vesalius, did have some primary prevention patients, but wasn't solely primary prevention. So it'll be more data specific to inclisiran, but data that I think will be just useful to the field of primary prevention and PCSK9 inhibition, more broadly speaking, and LDL lowering even more broadly speaking. So more data I find always is useful. And then there's bempedoic acid, which had great data from CLEAR Outcomes. Likewise remains quite underutilized. Also, issues with pre-authorizations there, unfortunately, that can hamper use. I mean, the pre-authorization thing is really a challenge in clinical practice, and really is an impediment to providing great patient care many times. But nonetheless, yes, the guidelines, endorsing use in various situations of these different LDL lowering strategies. Hopefully that'll help even in terms of getting third-party payers more on board when doctors appropriately are prescribing these drugs.